All right, everybody, this is Blue Spruce Holdings education course, right? So we're with John Panagako and Calvin Newton. So these guys are national lenders for apartment buildings. So this specific type of insured lending is actually quite fascinating. Not everybody knows about it. So we wanted to come at you today with a little bit of info. All right, so here, Calvin, will you introduce yourself a little bit first?
Calvin Newton from Colorado Springs, Colorado. I've been in real estate since I was 20 years old. I bought my first fix and flip at that time, and I have built houses, fixed and flipped houses, managed some houses, built industrial, office, warehouse space, subdivided land, and I'm also a real estate broker in Florida, but I'm not licensed at this time, but I do keep my CUs up, and I was a Series 7 licensed with Bear Stearns for many years and syndicating and doing a lot of deals. So
wow! So you've done syndications?
Yeah.
Wow!
And most of that was real estate.
Okay. And you've been in part of lending on what kind of assets so far?
Gosh, everything from apartments to assisted living, office space, high-rise office space, condominiums. I'm a hard money lender now for certain commercial properties.
As long as the loan's big enough, you'll lend hard money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's too big?
Nothing's too big.
Nothing's too big. So this is on our podcast too.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have seen the podcast yet, but as far as one of the deals that Blue Spruce Holdings was working on, we didn't close it.
Yeah.
But these guys didn't even blink at it. It was $118 million is what we were asking to borrow, and it was like it was nothing. So pretty awesome. John Panagako, tell us a little bit more about you, where you came from.
But
Sure.
Most of our deals are not 118 million.
Okay. They're more 200 million?
There were 117 million. In any event, I'm John Panagako. I'm president of Trust Mortgage Company that was founded in 1988. We are in a narrow area using FHA mortgage insurance to do new construction, refi acquisition, substantial rehab for apartments, assisted living, and nursing homes. We also do Freddie and Fannie, but not with our lender as a lender with our team. So the property types are kind of specific. We don't really do what Calvin does as far as office, retail, hotel, and other types of real estate, self-storage, etc. What we do, it's not really unique. It's been around since I think the Housing Reform Act of 1939 or whatever, which allowed FHA to 100% insure private lenders. In order to be able to do that, you need to get licensed, you need to have equity, liquidity requirements, the usual kind of stuff, E&O coverage. But what it means is we can do a new construction for a conventional apartment complex at 85% of cost with a kind of a backdoor 10% developer fee based on everything but the land value, non-recourse, completely non-recourse, and then it rolls into a 40-year permanent rate and term at around 4 to 4.25 today, 85% loan to value for refi acquisition, 80% cash out for apartments. We can't do cash out for assisted living and nursing home because Congress's enabling legislation didn't allow it. But it is a conventional program with a new construction apartment property or a nursing home. You could raise the lower bed rates during construction without permission. There's no limit to the amount of money you can make. It's got nothing to do with subsidized housing. You're not limited to a certain percent affordable. It's just a market rate kind of deal with this other insurance thing thrown in. Because we're 100% insured by HUD, Jennie Mae's can be issued to back up the mortgage, so theoretically we can't run out of money. And that's basically the way the program works. And we've done this from Anchorage to Boca, literally, and in most states in between in most HUD offices. HUD keeps trying to reinvent itself, and they're trying to streamline this process, and things have been moving, I'd say, a lot better since the new administration, actually.
Okay.
Do you want me to discuss some of the things that we do and some of the loans, or?
Yeah. You know what? Tell us a couple of your credentials. Why don't you say, why should people listen to you? Right?
I've been doing this a while, so no matter how dumb I am, I should have picked up something. But
Okay.
I was originally an accounting major and controller of a property management company and got into property management because it looked like fun. Actually, my first 3 deals were large, new constructed, subsidized properties that were under organize rent strikes. So that was
Oh,
that was a
fun.
lot of fun.
How
And
many units have you managed so far?
about 60,000, and had my own management company, which included luxury condos and subsidized housing, which became the HUD Connection, actually.
Okay.
And I was director of development for a large company, multi-state. So as a lender, we kind of speak language of developers and investors that I think other lenders do not. They're interested mostly in the industry. It's mortgage brokers trying to earn a fee and move on to the next deal, which is why a lot of people haven't heard of this. It's not the norm. There's an insurance program thrown in on top of basic underwriting by a lender. But it is a conventional program. HUD makes a lot of money on the insurance fund that they use for their other programs within HUD, which is why there aren't any hooks on it for, it's got, like I said, nothing to do with subsidized housing or limited dividend.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you've been property manager with 60,000
Units in
Units.
total, right.
You've done all sorts of stuff. Calvin's done all sorts of stuff. Syndications, assisted living, etc. You
Right.
guys understand it. You speak the language, so you're able to kind of be the voice for me to the end lender. And vice versa.
The end
You're able
borrower,
to tell me, all the information from them.
Yeah, we get involved a lot in development decisions that we probably shouldn't be as a lender, as Calvin knows, that, with advice and also, it's one thing to structure a deal so it works for this insurance program. It's another to actually help a borrower make up where can you go to get other equity. And
Okay.
get the land in as an equity piece and some of the other things that we've done.
That's the point I was going back to. Most borrowers don't understand what all is equity, that they can put their land in and any other money they have contributed to that.
Okay.
So engineering, fencing around the property maybe.
Interesting. So what is insurance lending? What's different with what you guys do compared to me just going to the bank?
Well, compared to like Freddie and Fannie lenders,
Uh-huh.
those lenders are 80% insured by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which means they assume the top 20% of the liability. So you get very varied underwriting on different loans. You might be refinancing 120 units that you built 10 years ago and get a certain set of terms, and then go to the same company with the same complex, another 120 units you built on the other side of town, and it looks completely different because it depends on what their risks are and what they're willing to take. This is kind of static. The only people who can really change these terms is Congress. So it's 85% of value on an acquisition with a 35-year fixed rate mortgage, no rate adjustment, nothing. Current rates 3.25 to 4.0 fixed for 35 years, and 4 to 4.25 for the new construction. And it doesn't matter if it's assisted living or apartments, because somebody's buying a AAA rated security, a Jennie Mae. So
Yeah.
it could be kind of nursing home in Puerto Rico or an apartment complex in Anchorage.
Okay. Good deal. So what else do you guys do?
There is a program also for hospitals, which is a 25-year program, and
Okay.
it has to be a hospital. It can't be a clinic, and more than 50% has to come from hospital stays.
More than 50% of the revenue?
Of the revenue, right,
Okay.
right.
Gotcha.
Right. I thought it might be interesting if you want to go into some of the mortgage terms and what they mean.
Yeah,
from
let's.
the commercial
I
standpoint.
think that's giant. So yeah, I'd love that.
Let's talk about cap rates.
Okay.
We're talking loan to value, and even new construction deals sometimes are based on what's the value going to be once it's constructed. And values really are determined by capitalization rates. What that rate is what an investor expects to get from this property, and it varies. For example, you might be looking at a 200-unit property that you want to rehab in Newark, New Jersey, in an iffy neighborhood. Your expectation for risk return is going to be maybe you want to make 15% of the money that you put in.
Okay.
That basically would be looked at as like a 15% cap rate. So if there was, and that cap rate is used to divide into the net operating income to determine value.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had $100,000 of income in a property and you wanted a 10% return, you divide 10% into 100,000, that property's worth $1 million. If it's a newer property and there's much less risk involved, and you're willing to buy that property at an 8 cap, meaning an 8% return, that 100,000 divided by 8% is $1,250,000 value, so you could pay $1,250,000 and get the return you're expecting. And if it's more of a risk, you might want a 12% return. Now with that same $100,000, the property's only worth $833,000. So from an 8 to a 12 cap, the property's worth anywhere from $833,000 to $1,250,000, depending on the cap rate. The real confusing thing is who determines cap rates. And appraisers do by looking at comparable sales to see what cap rate they sold at, and then they try to figure out what cap rate should I use for your property.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's a matter of opinion when you get down to the end, but they're close enough.
Gotcha.
For government work. So a lot of people sometimes get confused as to what debt service coverage means, and that's the amount of income that's available to support the debt. So our refi acquisitions are at a 120 debt cover, meaning you need 20% more income than what the not the mortgage payment, what the debt service is, principal and interest. So if you're looking at a property and you know it's a 120 debt cover, you can take that interest rate because you know what the mortgage payment's going to be. It's going to be 80% of whatever the income is. Solve for mortgage, and you know the amount of mortgage that you can get. Now you know what kind of cash you need depending on the sales price. That might sound a little confusing, but most people now with an Excel spreadsheet can compute a mortgage amount based on what the mortgage payment is.
So what you're saying is, let's take that $1 million property at the 10 cap of $100,000 a month coming in. What you're saying is, if we had a 1.0 debt service coverage ratio, a 1.0, that would mean that our mortgage cost us a whole $100,000. But if we were doing the 1.2, that would mean that our mortgage was costing us the minus of that. So
$80,000.
Yeah. So so the same thing goes, like if I wanted to know if my numbers were going to work for you, we just look at what we think it would cost us for our mortgage and make sure that we have 120% coming in.
Correct.
Of what you're going. Okay.
Right, and you subtract that from the sales price, and that's the amount of cash you've got to put in, or what your offer is. If you're paying sales price, depending where you are, maybe you have to.
Okay. Good deal.
So that's what debt service coverage means. Sometimes people don't understand. You're looking at a property, and you've done careful calculations and looked at the market. And you think it's worth $1 million, but it needs a new roof that costs $30,000. And you don't realize that the roof is really gone. And an appraiser comes in and decides that deferred maintenance has to be deducted. So when you're looking at a property or even refinancing a property, generally there's always some kind of property inspection. And major deferred maintenance like that is something that gets deducted from value that can kill a deal or kill you in the end.
So they'll take a look at the roof. What are the other big things that they look at?
HVAC, the heating, ventilating, air conditioning system. If it's got like 80 amp service and it's an older property, there might be an opportunity for a rehab. We do rehabs with the new construction program, 40 years, 85%, 90% of cost, literally with the developer fee.
So you're just saying that whatever amount we have in deferred maintenance, if it's $200,000,
right,
that has to come off the top, the purchase price.
Right.
Okay.
If it's a $10 million property and there's $2-3 million in deferred maintenance, that's probably a major rehab. It's not just an acquisition loan.
Okay.
So it means it's a whole different scenario, obviously.
And you can lend obviously on an acquisition, but
Right.
you also do the deferred maintenance.
Right.
What do you call that kind of loan?
That would be a substantial rehab loan
Okay.
with an acquisition.
Okay.
Same as buying the land, but they're buying a property that needs building.
Good deal.
Building.
Perfect.
Gross potential rent sometimes is something that people get confused about. They think that's the rent that they're going to use for the debt service calculation and everything.
Oh.
And what it is the total amount of rent for what the current rent roll is, plus the street rent for all the vacant apartments. And that becomes kind of important later. A lot of people don't understand how that relationship works or how vacancies work. You look at a property and somebody says there's 5 units vacant out of 100. That's 95% occupancy.
Okay.
Literally, it's not. They might have 3 units that are rented for next month that they took off the list, so it's really 8 vacancies. They might have 10 people who didn't pay rent this month. So what I suggest is that somebody takes the current rent roll, meaning the street rents for the vacant units and the current rents that they're getting, multiply it by 3 to get 3 months worth, and then look at the last 3 months of collections for rent. When you add those together and subtract it from the gross potential of 3 months, that's your vacancy credit loss. And that's the real number, unless they're giving you bogus statements. But that is the real number. That's the easiest way to figure out what's going on. Commercial mortgage brokers sometimes want to color things the best way they can in order to sell a deal.
Okay.
So no one really buys a deal. No one buys a larger property without getting the real records first and verified real estate tax bills and that kind of stuff, and running down to the city or municipality and finding out if there's a tax increase in the works, and inspecting every unit. I mean, we used to do that. I used to put teams together to inspect every unit if we were going to do an acquisition of a large property. It just becomes very important. Loan to value, I think everybody knows what that means. It's who determines the value. The appraiser on your job. If you get an appraisal on your house, probably going to make you feel good. When the bank does one, probably won't feel as good because there's more of a hedge for when a lender is involved and the risk comes in.
That makes
It's
sense.
just the way it works. Net operating income is something else that it's important because it's what determines value when you divide it by the cap rate. Net operating income is the income that you get subtracted by the expenses that you have, and it's operating expenses. Operating expenses do not include depreciation, does not include debt service. Part of operating part of operating expenses, the way an appraiser looks at it or anybody for value, there has to be a number in there for reserve replacements. One of the biggest problems in real estate is inadequate reserves. They're funded with us, but generally lenders don't fund it, but they use it for the debt service calculation. I'd say generally a decent property that doesn't have much deferred maintenance, somewhere around $400 to $500 per unit per year is what they'll put in for an operating expense. Operating income is income from operations. It usually won't include late fees or things that are extraordinary, fines, things like that. It will include rent, it will include vending machine income if there's a pool, laundry income, that kind of thing. Direct income from the property. So that's how operating expenses are determined, and the net income that it's going to be subtracted from to determine NOI divided by the cap rate gives you the value. If there's any deferred maintenance, it gets deducted from value. There's some other terms that come in that people use for useful life and economic life and remaining life, which have different meanings. Our mortgages have to be for 75% of the remaining economic life. What that means, if let's say we're doing a 100-year-old property in Boston or Chicago, that property is going to be there 100 years from now. It may be torn down, part of it may be rebuilt 3 times during that period, but the economic life is definitely out there because of where it's been. Useful life is different. That might be only 50 years, but where we look at is economic life, which is what most lenders do. If you're in a deteriorating neighborhood that is being destroyed, there's a building being torn down every 2 months in this neighborhood or city, I won't mention it, but then the useful life and the economic life probably isn't where you would want it to be.
Gotcha.
And that's basically in a nutshell what we do. Apartments includes anything that people are getting a rent on, which is one ownership entity. So you could have Newco that's building apartments, that's 200 single-family houses on one piece of land, but rented as apartments with leases. It could be a high-rise. It could be age-restricted. It could be a retirement community. It could be a subsidized property. We have programs for that too. As far as healthcare goes, we do nursing homes and assisted living. Assisted living is help for the frail elderly. It's help for the frail elderly with the necessities of daily living. To get an FHA insured loan, you have to meet at least 3 of those necessities of daily living. Help with housekeeping, help with meal preparation, help with dressing, help with medical monitoring. There's a lot of them. Help with transportation. Our definition is if 3 meals a day are included in the rent, which is true in most areas to get a license, that's assisted living, because they probably have a van to go to the market. That's transportation. They always have housekeeping services available, etc. And everybody seems to be getting into assisted living, which means they don't know what they're doing. From our standpoint, we don't finance anything unless the team has done one before. If it's an inexperienced developer, we get him an experienced operator as a partner with some risk in the property in order to ensure that that it'll get done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's
I
a
get
tricky
that.
area and changing. People used to think it was need-driven. All of a sudden it became market-driven. You can't sell the house, the kids aren't putting you in assisted living. And these home health care agencies have cropped up, which are franchises, to trap people in their houses. People live longer in assisted living. There's music on Tuesdays, bingo on Wednesdays. There's a community and a life, going on there.
Great. Do you have anything else for us today?
Whatever you want to ask me, I'm here.
Great.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Really
Adam.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much.
So you came from Boston.
We're here for a deal, an assisted living deal actually, that we're financing for Calvin.
Perfect. And does he need a really good operator, or does he need?
His borrower is an operator already.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. That's awesome.
Very experienced.
I think you know him. His name's John Smith. No,
There you
I made
go.
that up.
Yeah.
I think you just had a heart attack.
I know John Smith.
There you go.
Anyway, everybody, thank you for joining us for this short education on insured borrowing, insured lending for apartment houses, as well as assisted living, and a few other classes that you guys can do. Of course, my company, we're all about the apartment buildings, so we've bought 3 so far, and we hope you guys finance one of our next ones. So we've got a couple under contract now, so let's do it. Let's do it together, and take it easy, everybody. Bye.
Thank you very much.